All right. Okay. Good morning. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for joining us for the first of our Expo Readiness series for the Lehigh Valley Meet the Buyers Expo. Today is focused on navigating business certifications. My name is Brett Smith. I'm the chair of the Meet the Buyer Steering Committee, as well as the director of the Small Business Development Center here at Lehigh University. Just a couple of quick housekeeping items. First of all days, there's a construction vehicle outside, so if the noise does get too much, I apologize. But it should be fine. But also this is being recorded, so I will get a copy of this out to you either later today or first thing tomorrow morning. And I will also include a copy of today's slides. Additionally, because this is a listen-only webinar, there's no chat feature, but there should be a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen or somewhere around your screen. You can click that, you can submit a question, and I'll answer them throughout or keep it to the end depending on where it fits in when it was asked. So feel free to ask questions throughout the entire time, and we'll go ahead and get started. So a little bit about the Meet the Buyers Expo. It is a reverse trade show that's hosted here in the Lehigh Valley. So typically when you go to a regular business trade show, you as somebody who's looking to sell their products would have a table, and people looking to buy your products would go and walk and interact with you. So we do the opposite here. So we have the buyers, which are typically large corporations in the region. So like this year, for example, we have PP&L that'll be here. We have a couple of government agencies as well that are looking to purchase from small businesses. So, they will have tables, and then as the business will walk the show, interact with people, and have meetings. And it really provides one of the only opportunities, if not the only opportunity in the Lehigh Valley, to really bring together large businesses or small to medium-sized businesses here in the Valley and provide that opportunity to connect. Because sometimes it can be very hard to get in touch with these businesses and their purchasing departments. So this is really a way, we look at it as condensing months of business development into one morning. So details about the event, it is Wednesday, April 3rd, 2024. So coming up in a few months. It'll run from 8 a.m. till 12 p.m. and it'll be hosted here at Lehigh University up on the Mountaintop campus in the Iacocca Conference Center. Tickets are $25 if bought individually, but if you're looking to have multiple people from your organization attend and buy them at once, it's $20 per ticket. So we do a $5 discount if you're buying multiple. Okay. You certainly don't need to attend the expo in order to attend these sessions. These are meant to train, as general training in addition to preparing you for the expo. But if you are interested, I'll provide a link if you're interested in attending, or if you have more questions, you can feel free to contact us, and our email address is there at the end as well. So today's session again is looking at focusing on certifications. So what are they? They're really a way to verify ownership and control of a business. So multiple, there's a number of the federal government, state government, some local governments, private sectors. There's starting to be a bigger push, in supplier diversity that, there's really a benefit from buying from small businesses, from diverse businesses, and also it's just good business practice. So, what happens is they're looking to do business with, say, a woman-owned business, but how do they know that you're truly a woman-owned business? Because especially as certifications have gotten harder to obtain because there's been more checks and balances in them. For example, back years ago when they first started doing this, a common anytime you have an opportunity where there's potential benefit, there's always opportunity for potential fraud. And so what you would have happen is, say, for example, a husband and wife company where the wife would own 51% of the company, husband would own 49%, but the husband is running the day-to-day business. So it's not really owned and controlled by a woman owner. So certifications were put in place to really try and make sure that they're doing business with who they say they're doing business with. So they're used, like I said, to access federal government opportunities, state government opportunities, local government in the sense of typically larger cities like Philadelphia, Pittsburgh. In Pennsylvania specifically, a lot of your municipalities and smaller cities aren't allowed to preference, different kinds of businesses. So you're usually, when we say local here in Pennsylvania, we're talking about like the city of Philadelphia, city of Pittsburgh, and private sector. So if you're looking to do business with, say, Walmart or PP&L or Crayola or, any type of larger company, they're going to also accept certain certifications to be able to do business with them and to access their opportunities. The process varies, so we're going to talk about how to go through that process throughout this session. There's self-certification, which basically means you just check a box or maybe upload a document and you can say that you're certified. And then there's the formal certifications, which somebody is actually on the other end reviewing your documentation, talking with you, going through a process to make sure that you are truly, your business is truly owned by who you say it's owned by. Some of them are free. Some of them have a cost attached to them. We will talk about all of that. And, the process varies in terms of application to certification. So, typically we say, for any of the more formal ones, you're typically looking at 3 to 6 months easily. It just depends on how many they're going through at a time, what the process is, how many questions they have for you. But again, typically you're looking at least 3 months for any of these more formal ones. So we'll talk about where all that plays in as we go through this process. And again, there's people joining us, there is a Q&A box. It should be at the bottom of your screen, I believe. So if you do have questions at any point throughout, feel free to type a question in and I'll make sure I get to it. If I don't get to it right away, I'll make sure I get to it at the end. But what's also important is what certifications are not. Certifications are not magic wands. I can promise when you get your certification that a government agency is not going to call and say, hey, I have 10 contracts, how many would you like? That's not how it's going to work. But they do, you still have to market yourself. You still have to have a product or a service that the agency or the company needs. And that you can do it better, offer it cheaper, more efficient, whatever it is, than whoever they're currently buying from. So you still have to be able to sell yourself, your business. But the certification can help maybe open a door that that it otherwise wouldn't have, give you access to a contract you may not have always been access to, but it's not going to, you're still going to have to do your normal business development. Contracts are not just going to appear. It's also not the sole way to access different opportunities. So even if you are a woman-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned business, you can still access regular small business opportunities. You don't have to, you don't have to limit yourself. So if you decide, maybe I don't want to pay for a certification, maybe I'm not really at the point where I want to go through a whole certification process, you can still access small business opportunities at all of those different levels. You just may not, you're just going to have a higher competition pool. And additionally, they're not a fit for every business. Especially newer businesses, it may not be, you may not be at a point where it's, maybe it might not be worth the cost, or you may not be at a point where you can really take advantage of what the certification would provide. You may not, depending on your market, and we'll talk about this in a couple slides, you may not necessarily need a certification for what you're looking to go for, or you may not need the one that you think you do. So just because you can get a certification doesn't mean it's the right choice. And we can always, again, through the SBDC here, we can always talk about those options, talk about what may be a good fit, and if it is a right fit. Additionally, a lot of the agencies we're going to talk about, even though they do charge, they're not in it to make money. They do that because of the work that goes involved in actually doing the certification. So they will genuinely, meet with you, talk with you, you can talk to them beforehand, see if it is truly a good fit, and they will be upfront and honest with you about that. So just a quick little overview of the acquisition process. So understanding when government or a large company is going to make a purchase. So they're issuing a proposal, or they're going to seek out somebody to buy it. Buy it from, what is that process and why? Because a lot of times you may go look for a government opportunity. You say, well, I'm a woman-owned business and I do this, but it's only set aside for veteran-owned businesses. How do they determine all that? So without going into too much detail, because that's a webinar in and of itself, but you can see typically when you're seeing the proposal or the offer on somebody's website, you're already here at this step. So they've already determined how they're going to buy, who they're likely going to, not necessarily who they're going to buy it from, but the pool that they're going to likely get proposals from, and how they're going to do it. So they're already here. What happens is back in here, when they're figuring out, and you do this too as a business owner, where you're figuring, okay, we need to buy a piece of equipment, who offers it? Where can we get it for a good price? Is there anybody local that can do it? Maybe we want to buy from one of the businesses or somebody that can do that. You're doing all that market research up here, figuring out what it is you need, what will meet your goals, and the government and the larger companies are doing the same thing. And so they're usually figuring out, are they going to try and set it for a woman-owned business or a diverse business or a small business, whatever category they're using? they're going to determine that back here. So that's where it's important to be able to network with folks, to be able to get on, to be registered, be certified if it's relevant, be on those lists, be able to make sure that you're being part of that conversation when they're doing this. Okay. So just again, a little overview. This is overly complicated because this is from a Department of Defense agency. So, we're talking about mission, all this other stuff. So this is obviously way more complicated than it needs to be, but just to give you an idea of everything that goes into the process and why some of those decisions may, may be different, may not match what you think. So just give a quick overview before we dive into the individual certifications. There's really sort of three general kinds. So there's your self-certification, which is free. Obviously, it makes it pretty quick and painless process. There's minimal, if any, documentation. For Pennsylvania, you have to upload a couple of documents, but for the federal side, you don't have to upload anything. But that leaves it, that kind of leaves you open to some issues. So one, if you win a contract self-certified, likely somebody's going to protest because how do you, you've checked the box, but how do you prove that you truly are, whatever certification that is? And what's happening more and more frequently, this happened, for example, with the Women-Owned Small Business Program, they changed, they're going to change it. So, they may disappear, they may not always be there. So it may more be a temporary option, but something you can certainly do while it exists. But again, it's sort of the quick way to get in as you're looking to figure it out. It can be a good way if you're trying to just test the waters. But if it's something you're seriously looking to get into with contracting, you may want to go with one of the more formal options down the road. Additionally, you have that you have your formal government certifications. So these are free. So that's always a great benefit. And they're verified by somebody in the government. So these are, somebody's actually looking at your documentation. Somebody is verifying this. They're communicating with you. They're making the determination that you are, whichever type of business that they're certifying. They do have the idea of being lucrative, not in the sense that, again, you're not going to get contracts thrown at you, but because you've been verified by the government, it sort of has that cachet to it. But the downsides, there's significant documentation involved, like pretty much every document from your business you're going to have to submit. There's renewals, depending on how often depends on this particular one. And they're very difficult to obtain because, again, the government's reviewing it, so there's much more stringent standards. Then you have your formal third-party certification. So these are done by another entity, so not the government, that they're also verified. So somebody is also looking at these and making a determination. They do usually have partnerships with the private sector, so where they'll accept their specific certification. A lot of private sector companies will accept some government certifications, but not always. They do provide access to additional resources similar to a chamber of commerce. So they will have networking events, trainings, there's member directories, things like that. So there are additional benefits, but there are fees associated with it. You're usually looking at least $300 a year for these types of certifications. And yeah, for these you have to renew typically every year. So before we go into each one, what you should think about as we're talking about these is these few questions. One, what is your readiness? For example, are you ready? Is your business ready now to go after these types of contracts, or is this like maybe next year or 2, 3, 4 years down the road? And that can help determine, is a certification right for you at this point? Maybe it's good to go with either a self-certification option or one of the free options before you go through and pay somebody $300 a year for something you're not necessarily at a point in your business that you can take advantage of. Understanding what your market is. And this is probably the most important of these 4 questions because it can really determine what options are available to you. So we usually ask, are you looking to sell federal, state, local, private sector? And typically clients will say, yes, all of those, which is, again, admirable goal. But the idea is that what is the biggest priority for you right now? For example, if you're if you're a machine shop and you make things that can be used by the military, then maybe going right into federal contracting makes the most sense. But if say you're a cleaning company and trying to go right into a federal contract may be a lot more difficult just because A, it's very competitive, and B, again, it's a lot of lift. Whereas with machine shop, you kind of have a very specific industry. So it might make more sense to start local government, state government, or the local private company, something like that. So understanding your market can also help determine which certifications you need. For example, if you're going federal government, you know which ones they accept. If you're going for the state government, there's certain ones they accept. So you want to make sure you're applying for the correct certification, that you're not just applying for something and then turns out the market, either the agency or the companies that you want to do business with don't even accept that. So you want to make sure that you understand, I want to get into it now, and this is who I want to target, and that can help, really further that conversation. Timeline, again, like I said, typically these certifications are going to take 3 to 6 months for any of the formal ones. So you want to make sure, again, if you're looking at a solicitation right now, it's going to be too late. You're not going to get that certification in time. 30 days is probably the bare minimum that one would get processed in, and that's best case scenario. So you want to make sure, and this is sort of why we picked to do this training session first, because the expo is in April. So that's about 4 or 5 months from now. 4 probably. 5. So you want to make sure that you have enough time to get the certification for what it is that you want to do. And what is your budget? Again, some of these $300, $400, $500 a year, it's not sustainable for every business. So you want to make sure, is there a free certification that might benefit you now before you decide to make the leap into paying for one? Is it, again, and if you are going to pay for it, are you able to take advantage of everything it has to offer? So you can, kind of balance all that in there as well. So to get started, small business is kind of the most basic. That's really going to be a self-certification at every level. And, again, most businesses are going to qualify for this. So on the federal side, if you're looking to be a small business and do business with the federal government, you need to meet the SBA size standards. And I'll click on these in a minute to show you how they work. But they're based on NAICS codes. So NAICS stands for National Association of Industry Classification Systems, something like that. Basically, they're 5 or 6 digit numbers that will sort of, identify what industry you work in. You can have multiple NAICS codes. You can have only one. It doesn't matter. But I'll show you how to find those as well. And it's typically based on revenue or employees. So it's either going to be, typically if you're a more service-based business, it's going to be based on your average revenue over the last 5 years. And if you're more, say, manufacturing, it's going to be employee-based. For Pennsylvania specifically, it's similar but a little different. You have to be independently owned, which means that you can't be a subsidiary of another company. You can't be dominant in your field of operation, which typically for most small businesses, they're not going to be. You can't have more than 100 full-time equivalent employees. So the standard's a little more stringent on the employee side for Pennsylvania versus the federal. And gross annual revenues of less than $38.5 million. And that number's gone up because it used to be about 20 million or 25 million. Okay. So to decide if you're a small business, you can click this link. And again, the slides will be sent to everybody. So you can click these links as well. Click this. This will take you right to the SBA's tool. And you can go through. If you're not sure what your NAICS code is, you can type in a keyword. So for example, if I say, okay, I'm engineering services, that's my code. You can also add multiple NAICS codes here. So if you want to try different things, just see what it is. So we'll say I'm also an architecture firm because, a lot of times architects and engineers are housed in the same company. So I want to see, do I count as a small business? So you're going to enter those, you can click search. Okay. And so those are based on receipts. So it's going to say over the last 5 years, what's my average annual revenue? So I'm going to say, we'll say $1 million. Right? You can put in whatever number you want here. Okay, check size. And it will tell you, okay, so for engineering services, as long as I'm under $25.5 million in annual revenue, I'm a small business. Okay? But for architecture, it's under $12.5 million. So again, at $1 million in revenue is not really a concern. But as I grow and I realize, okay, if I want to bid on an architecture contract, but I'm at $20 million in revenue, I'm not going to be considered small. So again, you can see these are very, very high standards. The vast majority of our clients, for sure, we'll rarely cross these. They do, and that's great. But again, you can see we're talking, very, very, very high numbers. Okay. So now let's see, for example, an employee one. So I'm going to say I'm a manufacturer. We'll just say I make batteries. Because that's easy. So we'll do that. How many employees? We'll say I have 100 employees. Okay, you can see for battery manufacturing specifically, 1,250 employees. So again, high numbers. Typically, the number, usually for services, it's going to be $15 million. For ones where they're employee-based, typically it's going to be about $500, but different industries have different qualifications. So that's why it's important to look. They've also bumped a lot of those numbers up since COVID, just to be more reflective of of what is truly small. So you can go through this. You can put in whatever you want. You can add as many as you like, and you can see if you're a small business there. If you're not sure what your NAICS code is and you'd like to look, and it's not maybe showing up on that thing, you can click this link, and you can go through. So they start you out at sort of 2 digits in your code. So you can say, okay, I'm a manufacturer. So I'm going to click here. You can decide what kind of manufacturing that it is you do. So you're going to see all these different things here. So let's say I'm going to be a bakery. So I'm going to click that. A retail bakery. I'm going to make donuts. And so you can see here, that's my NAICS code. So 311811 is my NAICS code. A lot of times there'll be other things here. So if you're not necessarily sure, do I fit in that category? Do I not? You can click and it'll give you, again, other kinds of businesses that fit in this code as well. So you can click that. So the next sort of self-certification that exists is the small disadvantaged business. So this is specific to federal government. This is the federal government's equivalent of a minority-owned business certification. You have to be 51% owned and controlled by one or more disadvantaged persons. And so ownership and control is important for all of these. So it doesn't just mean that you're the majority owner, but also that a disadvantaged person is in control of the business. So this is back to the husband and wife example I gave, where the wife owns the company, but the husband runs it. In this case, a disadvantaged person would have to, it can be more. So it can be a disadvantaged person owns it and another disadvantaged person controls it. That's also fine. Or it can be, any number of any combination as long as it equals 51%. You must be socially and economically disadvantaged, and I've linked to the definitions of those. Socially will tell you which racial and ethnic groups qualify as socially disadvantaged, and economically disadvantaged is a convoluted formula from the government standpoint that you can click and see there. So I've just linked to those because 1, there's not enough room on the slides, and 2, because they can change, this will take you to the most recent versions. And when you sign up as a contractor in SAM, which is the federal government's contractor database, you check a box and agree that you are small and disadvantaged there. Okay, so you can check that out. Next is the 8A Business Development Program. So this is what I would call the formal version of the of small disadvantaged business. So this is a this sort of same guidelines. 51% owned and controlled by one more disadvantaged person. Socially and economically disadvantaged, must be small. But this is a training program. So calling it a certification is not really accurate, but it does get lumped in all the time with the certification. So we do include it. The 8A program is very difficult to get into because it's a 9-year training program. So essentially you spend, if you're looking serious into contracting, this can be a very valuable program for you. It's a 9-year, it's a mentor protege program. So you're paired with a mentor. And there's a lot of hands-on, there's a lot of training, a lot of hands-on work to help get you into contracting. The one thing to make sure with the 8A program is that you are ready to do contracting, because once you start that clock, it doesn't stop. So you can't say, okay, I'll apply now, but maybe in another year I'll start working on it. Then you only have 8 years left. And you can't go back in and get those years back. So make sure that it's something you're ready for. And you can go into the certified.sba.gov to be able to apply for it. So if you click and go in, you can go through, you can go through, it'll ask you some questions to see if you are ready, if you're ready and eligible, and you can go through and apply. Again, the SBDC is certainly happy to help with you for any of these certifications that we talk about to decide if it is the right option for you. Right? And you can see here, HubZone, Veteran, and WSB will talk about all these as well as we go through. So the SBA has sort of unified all of those into one application or one application site. The HubZone program is, I believe, is sort of the last federally specific program that we're going to talk about. So HubZone stands for Historically Underutilized Business Zone. So these are areas that typically have high unemployment or high poverty. In the Lehigh Valley, you're looking at parts of downtown Allentown, Bethlehem, and Easton, and those are really the only areas in this region that qualify. But this one is different in that it's not based on the owner, it's based on location. So you do have to be a US citizen, but the key pieces are that your principal office is located in HubZone, so your headquarters is located in HubZone, and that at least 35% of your employees also live in a hub zone. So the idea is that hub zone businesses are helping to reduce unemployment and poverty with their business. And so that's the benefit of the hub zone program. Again, it's lucrative in that it's very hard to qualify for this program because of the location requirements. But you do get some other benefits as a contractor through hub zone. So what you can do, this will take you to the certify page that I just showed you. But you can click on the hub zone map and you can enter your address. You can enter your employee's address if you think you might qualify. I'm not going to enter one, but I can just zoom in here. Hopefully this doesn't cause problems on the share. But you can see here in the Lehigh Valley, again, you're really looking at parts of downtown Allentown, a little more Bethlehem and Easton. These areas, okay, apologies, because that's probably just going to cause problems. But there's areas, if you look here where you see that there's going to be areas that sort of have these lines through them, that means that they're currently hub zones, but they're likely going to be going away in a couple of years. So it may not be the best option if you're in one of those areas. Okay. So that's that. The Veteran Service Disabled Veteran Program, same thing. All of these are going to be 51% owned and controlled by the particular type of business owner. Must be registered, must be small. So the important distinction here is that if you're a veteran-owned business, so you're not disabled, but you are a veteran, there's no federal set aside for veteran-owned businesses. There are opportunities with the VA itself, with the Veterans Administration, but there's not a set aside across the entire government. The state of Pennsylvania also accepts the veteran-owned certification, and a number of private sector will accept it as well. But if you're a service-disabled veteran, there are set-asides across the government. So no matter which agency you're doing business with, there will be opportunities for service-disabled veterans. So again, this process has recently moved over to the SBA from the VA. So it's a little bit of a different process, but very similar, I'm sure, in scope. And again, it's also a free certification, like all the ones that I've mentioned so far. So again, you can apply for either veteran or service-disabled veteran, but it's important to note the veteran one is going to be more limited than the service-disabled one. The SBA also has a woman-owned certification to be a woman-owned small business. Same thing. The niche with this one is that it's restricted to certain industries. So for the SBA certification, this is where your NAICS code is going to come into play. They will really only certify you if you're in an industry that is historically underrepresented by women. So, say construction industry, manufacturing, engineering, different. They'll have a list on the website. They'll have a list when you put in your NAICS code. It'll tell you if it's part of the list. But this isn't sort of a one size fits all. It's only going to be if you are in one of those industries, you can apply for that certification. And again, this also is free, and it's also through the SBA. Getting into the third-party certifications, there is another woman-owned certification through the Women's Business Enterprise Council, which represents the Philadelphia region, and I think all of Pennsylvania. Same thing, owning control by one or more women. For these certifications, so with all the third parties, there's going to be a little bit different, whether you have to be a U.S. citizen, whether you can be a permanent resident. So you can be either a U.S. citizen or a legal resident alien to apply for this certification. A woman has to hold the highest title in the company. So you can't have a woman owner, but a man as a CEO. It's not going to work. And the woman owner also has to have expertise to run the business. So even though another woman may be CEO, you still have to have, as the woman owner, you still have to have the expertise to be able to run the business. And it has to be for profit and independent of other businesses. So you can't be a subsidiary of somebody else. And there's an annual fee if your revenue is under $1 million of $350, and it increases slightly as you increase in revenue. And you can click that link there to get to the application and to learn more about that certification. And that, again, it's an annual fee, so you'll pay to be certified, and then each year you'll have to pay to renew and get recertified. Minority owned is almost exactly the same, just a different agency. This is through the Eastern Minority Supplier Development Council, which covers this region. By 51% owned and controlled by one or more minority groups. You can see which minority groups they will certify on their website. Same thing, must be for profit and be in the United States. Management daily operations must be exercised by the minority ownership members. So same thing, almost exactly the same as the woman-owned certification. Annual fees a little cheaper at $300, but you also must renew every year. And again, these are all of these are very similar. They have sort of like a chamber of commerce where they have networking events, they will have training, they will have, you can, again, they have partnerships with larger companies that will accept those certifications. So again, there's different benefits for paying for these. If you're part of the LGBTQ community, there is the NGLCC has a certification as well, which is accepted by Pennsylvania. Again, very much the same thing as the others. The difference is, and this is an important note, the certification fee is the highest of all of them at almost $900 and a renewal fee of $500. But it does say if you are a member of a local affiliate chamber of the NGLCC, then they waive the fee. So it can either be the most expensive or the cheapest, depending on which one you're doing. So I don't know what the fees, I think, the fees will vary between the different chambers. So you can go to the website, find out what your options might be, and look there. But again, the federal government does not have a set aside for LGBTQ owned, but Pennsylvania does accept that as for their small diverse business program. Similarly, disability owned, again, Pennsylvania will accept from Disability In, which is the certifying agency. Again, same thing as all the others. Certification fee is $300, also renews annually. You can also, if you are a service disabled veteran, you can also go through the certification, but given that this one costs $300 and the federal one costs $0, I would generally recommend going with the $0 one. But you certainly have that option as well. So if you already have the disability in certification, you don't need to get two. Same thing, Pennsylvania accepts this. There's currently no federal set aside for disability owned. So you would, LGBTQ and disability owned would just go under regular small business set asides for that. So again, similarly, looking at Pennsylvania specifically, the one unique thing about Pennsylvania is that they have their small diverse business programs. So from Pennsylvania standpoint, for the federal government, for example, they have set asides. For example, you have to do X% with small businesses, X% with women-owned businesses, X% with service disabled veterans, and so on. Pennsylvania does not break out by category. So it's either you're small, diverse, and that's it. So this also is, again, where it depends on what market you're targeting. So if you're looking to go to Pennsylvania, you don't need, for example, if you're both, say you're a woman and a minority, you don't need to get both certifications in Pennsylvania. You can just get one, and it doesn't make any, from Pennsylvania standpoint, it makes no difference in terms of, it's good timing on the question. It makes no difference in terms of for Pennsylvania. So for Pennsylvania, you just upload your 3 most recent tax returns to verify as a small business. Again, these are the same things from the previous slide, but the certifications that they accept are all the ones that we've talked about so far for veteran, women, minority, LGBTQ, and disability owned. Again, there are other certifications that are out there. It does not mean that those other certifications are not good. It just means we usually highlight the ones that are relevant to Pennsylvania businesses. And since Pennsylvania accepts these are generally the ones we'll talk about. There are others. And certainly you're welcome to apply for any of those. But as you notice, a lot of the federal ones that we've talked about, like the woman-owned federal one and the small disadvantaged business, aren't going to count for Pennsylvania. So this is why it's important to know your market. But to clarify, somebody did ask about the multiple certifications. I will go into a little more detail on that. You can have multiple certifications. It just depends on, especially if they're the paid ones, are you willing to pay double, triple for any of those? They may be worth it. You can get access to different groups of people, different opportunities. But this is where knowing your market is important. So again, if you're looking to just do business for Pennsylvania, it doesn't really make sense to apply for more than one because you don't need to. Because from Pennsylvania standpoint, it only counts, you only need one to count as a diverse business. So it doesn't matter which of those categories you're in, you're going to be a diverse business. But say maybe in your industry, there might be a company that's really looking to buy from Black-owned businesses, but then there's another company that's looking to buy from woman-owned businesses, and you are both Black and a woman, then it maybe makes sense. So it really just depends on your target market. Generally, you're not going to need to apply for more than one, just because usually you're going to get the benefits from one that you would from the other. And we just got another question here. a full-time job and they file both small businesses and full-time job, will they count the full-time job as part of the income limit? Oh, there's a couple questions here. Okay. All right, let me think about. All right, let me get back to those questions that I think about. So just to wrap up, again, Pennsylvania, everything is here. You can click the link and register. There's a link if you're interested in attending the expo. You can click that here. If you have questions, you can email us here at meetthebuyers@lehigh.edu, and we can answer any other questions that you might have about the expo. Again, we're going to have a couple others. There's one in January, I believe, and there's one in either February or March, and then the other month we'll have a training session on using the platform. We just haven't advertised those yet because we don't have it up and running, but we will have one basically every month until the expo. All right, so let me go through these questions here. Okay, so if you had a full-time job and file both small business and full-time job is part of the income limit. So if you're looking in terms of, I'm assuming this is related to the economic disadvantage, they will probably look at all of that. They will probably look at that. But they do take out, it's convoluted because it's like they'll add some, they might add your house. I think they might even take out your house, but they might add your retirement in there. It's a very convoluted formula. It's sort of a modified net worth piece, but typically where a full-time job can come into play and where this is important, which may not specifically answer your question, but is good information, is especially for the formal certifications, they are going to want to know that you are in control of the company. And so in their minds, it's typically very hard to have another full-time job and be in control of your own business. So they are going to look at that. People do have part-time jobs that, that they are certified, but it's going to be very hard to convince a certifying agency that you can manage both a full-time job and running your business and having control of it. So it is something to consider if you're still in that early stage of your business and you have another job for income support. You may want to wait to apply until later on, until you're able to fully transition the business or at least go part-time, because especially if you're paying for it, you pay regardless of whether you get it certified or not. So if you fail the certification, they're still going to take your money. So if you're not, if you're still having a full-time job, probably gonna be very hard to get that certification. Okay. Question about what if you're a new business and didn't file a tax return related to Pennsylvania's business? You can just upload, unless it's changed, you can just upload a letter saying that you're a new business, and that in one of those spots, and that you don't have a tax return for that year. That'll be fine. Pennsylvania is probably the least picky in terms of self-certifying as a small business. You don't need to wait any length of time. Once you're registered as a business in Pennsylvania, you can file as a small business. Okay. And then the last question I'm seeing, is it recorded and available? Yes, it will be. For somebody to join late, yes, it will be going out to everybody either later today or early tomorrow, and the slides will be there as well. If there's any other questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. Otherwise, you can feel free, if you maybe have a more specific question, you can email us at meetthebuyers@lehigh.edu. We'll be happy to get back to you. So again, thank you for attending. I'll stay on for a minute in case there's any other questions, but if you don't have any questions, you can feel free to jump off and I will get this information to you. Thank you for attending. We hope to see you at the expo or at one of these future sessions. Please let us know if we can be of any assistance. All right. Thank you and have a great day.